The Galion TS34 is probably the only amplifier that uses EL34 and Bumblebee. Bumblebee capacitors. If you were expecting the transformer Bumblebee, I have a bridge to sell you in La La Land. So what is so special about Bumblebee capacitors? Now, Bumblebee capacitors are a type of vintage style capacitor known for their use in classic electric guitars, particularly Gibson models from the late 1950s. Now, many guitarists claim these capacitors produce a sweet full tone, contributing to the legendary sound of vintage Gibson's guitar. Now, Jupiter has made reissues versions of this Bumblebee, and I was crazy enough to use it in my new TS34 Tube integrated amp. Now, I've always said, I don't care if you put a microwave in the signal chain, nothing else matters as long as it sounds good and safe. It's true. The nature of these Bumblebee capacitors is that they have a vintage flavor to them. When you add a Bumblebee capacitor in the signal chain, the voice is fuller, more forward, and more intimate. Now, I'll talk about that later, but for now, I would say this. When you combine EL34 tubes, which are known for vocals, excellent for vocals, with Bumblebee capacitors, which add richness and fullness to the mid-range, and you put all that in the modern circuit designed by Mr. Liu from Deutsch, yep, you get something that for some people can be considered the endgame amplifier. By now, unless you're living under a rock, assuming you're into hi-fi, you have heard of the almost legendary Galion TS120 Tube integrated amp. One day, man, it will become legendary. Every YouTuber and their pet has given the TS120 their blessing, and Hi-Fi Plus British Magazine featured the TS120 SE as a highly recommended product of the last year. Now, on top of that, go to the Gallion website and there are like tons of positive reviews from actual owners, in case you thought I have bought off all the reviewers with instant noodles. Now, for those who don't know, I have started a company called Gallion. The success of 120, I want to bring it to more people at an affordable price. Now, I've been bringing different products to market, and each product has experienced a very positive reception. It's not by accident, but rather by hard work and a bit of luck. I spend a lot of time ensuring all my products are worth your hard-earned money. The new TS34 that uses EL34 tubes sells for $2,950 USD. Although not pocket change, it is an amp that has reached a level of performance that can be an endgame amplifier for some of you. So in that sense, it is an incredible value. Now, some of you can get off the hi-fi merry-go-round with this amp. TS stands for Thomas and Stereo because I voiced it. 34 because we optimize it for EL34 tubes. Can also support KD77, KD88. The amp is rated at 25 watt in Class A and 40 watt in Class AB. Yep, just like its bigger brother, the TS120 SE, the TS34 is one of the few amplifiers on the planet that can run in Class A or AB mode. I'm not talking about triode and pentode, but high bias Class A mode. Class A sounds smoother, instruments and singers pop out more, while Class AB, there's more authority in the bass. Now, which class you prefer would depend on your speaker and taste. Now, this amp was designed by Mr. Liu from Deutsch Audio, and just like TS120 SE, I asked him to put his name on it because I like to recognize people for their work. Now, he's the nicest guy to work with. The only conflict we ever had was when it came to price. He always tried to charge me less, and I always insisted on charging me more because I believe in paying everyone fairly. So, why EL34 tubes? EL34 tubes like 300B, 6L6, EL34, 6V6, they're known for their mid-range. They might not have the dynamics of KT88, 120 and up, but many people still prefer EL34 because of the mid-range. Now, I'm not saying KT88 cannot have a killer mid-range. I got the Galion TS120 SE that uses KT88 to have a killer mid-range, but I have to use exotic and custom-made capacitors to achieve that. So, for the TS34, I spent some time voicing it, but not as long as the TS120 because of what I learned from voicing the TS120, right? That's the whole idea of trickle-down technology or knowledge. I knew exactly what to do and how to shape the TS34 sound. So for example, one of the things I did was like build sockets into the main board so I can just swap capacitors. I have like 1 million capacitors at home, and I was swapping one at a time to see how it changes the sound. It's time consuming but worth it. Time consuming because let's take Jupiter Vitamin Q for example. There's Vitamin Q Aluminium 0.01, 0.047, and then there's Vitamin Q Silver, Smooth Edition, Normal Edition, Bright Edition. See, all these caps, I had them custom made for me so I can try changing the sound of the TS34. So these things you can't find on the market, and it took me a lot of time to listen to different capacitors. Eventually I settled on Bumblebee capacitors, but then there's the aluminum version and there's the tin version. There's Bumblebee 0.01, 0.022, 0.033, 0.047. You get the point, right? I bought all those capacitors. Some days I would listen for 15 hours straight. So if someone asks you, Thomas, man, what do you mean by Thomas voice his products? So these are some of the things I do: swapping capacitors, swapping resistors, playing with bias voltage, you know, and so forth. Let me tell you a story. So behind the scene, like a high-profile person in the hi-fi world got to listen to my Class A Galion TS A20 amp, and within seconds he said, man, someone voiced this amp. There's soul to it. When you listen to a Gallion product, if you have experience, you can tell someone voiced it. If you like neutral, flat, colorless gear, the Gallion product is not for you. No right or wrong, it's just a question of preference. I have a very specific sound I'm looking for. So what happens with the Bumblebee capacitors in the signal chain? It adds richness to the mid-range and brings the singer more forward. The soundstage surrounds you more, and things tend to slow down. Now, some of you might say, darn it, man, Thomas, I'm going to order some Bumblebee, open up my amp, and turbocharge it. Well, not so fast. You have to worry about synergy. The problem with Bumblebee in the signal chain is that it slows down the presentation, and the bass becomes, you know, a bit softer and mellow. Yeah, it's enjoyable to listen like vintage gear, but you lose that modern precision. So you cannot just put Bumblebee capacitors in any amps and still maintain that modern sound. Now, I almost put it in the TS A20 because I love the mid-range, the vocals, but I used Vitamin Q because I needed the speed. So Bumblebee works excellently with the TS34 because of Doge circuit design. Now, their design tends to be lively and fast, insane attacks, hyper detail, and anyone who owns a Doge 10 or 8 will know what I'm talking about. So the slowness of the Bumblebee was a good match. The speed of the TS34 is so fast that it was able to overcome the slowness of the Bumblebee, but I was able to benefit from the warmth and richness in the vocal the Bumblebee has to offer. Now, of course, it's not that simple. So on top of Jupiter Bumblebee, there are also British Clarity caps, there's French Solène caps in the signal chain. So what results from spending countless hours working on the TS34? How does it sound? The TS34 is a very lively amp. However, thanks to EL34, the roundness of the tube, the TS34 is lively, but does not have hard edges, so it's very airy. It's not fatiguing. The top-end detail and mid-range resolution are at the level where you can hear a pin dropping. The airy soundstage. Man, I got to hand it to the designer, Mr. Liu. He knows how to design an amp with an excellent 3D, multi-layer soundstage. I mean, endgame level. The mid-range vocal has a lot of clarity and enough warmth not to sound thin. Now, some people like EL34 to be linear. I call it lean. I don't want a thin sounding amplifier. This is where the Bumblebee capacitor helped. It adds fullness to the mid-range. Now, another advantage of having exotic capacitor is the resolution. You will hear the saliva of the singer effortlessly. Next, although the bass is less strong than the TS120, it's still strong enough to rival many solid-state amps, including Class D. So what is unique about the bass is it's quick and tight. So let me tell you a story. One day, I invited Mr. Kanta, my audio buddy, to help me review the Maco Macaria speaker. See, at one point, I used this very expensive Class D amp, more than double the price of the TS34, because Class D amps are known to have very fast and tight bass. Now, Maco sent me this amp because I asked them to send me an amp that has very good synergy with the speaker. So after trying that Class D amp, which I will not name, so please don't ask me, we put on the TS34. Mr. Kanta and my jaw dropped, man. It felt faster, tighter, and more fun. We were surprised to find that because we did not expect it to rival an expensive Class D amp. It could be a synergy thing. If you have open baffle speakers like Maco speakers, consider giving this TS34 a try. And when the designer of the Maco speaker came to pick up the Macaria speakers, I let him listen to the combo, and yep, he was pretty surprised. Now, who is the TS34 not for? Now, if you're looking for an amp with that vintage, slow, mellow, soft presentation like those O2 amps, yeah, this is not it. If you don't like lively amps, this is not it. The TS34 is modern sounding, right? A speed, dynamic, detail, area, and attack. For the TS34 stock tubes, I've given it standard EL34 PSVANE C tubes because it's the best balance for the money. I try all types. And for all those who prefer a smoother presentation, Galion KT77, Mular EL34 will do the trick. For those who want it sharper, even sharper, more dynamic and lively, you could use the new Horizon tubes from PSVANE. Now, eventually, I'll make a more in-depth video about the Horizon tubes and compare the 6S and 7 to other brands for those looking for the ultimate tube for the Shitfreya Plus. For now, I will say this. If you're looking for a tube that will add more detail, more attack, more dynamic, more forwardness than these PSVANE Horizons, I mean this whole series has this characteristic. 2% of my clients who bought the TS120 SE asked me what tubes they could buy to get more sharpness and detail. Now these Horizon KT88 will give you that extra sharpness, and these Horizon tubes are particularly good for amps that lack a bit of dynamics, a bit of air, a bit of attack. Now, I did not include them with the TS34 because the TS34 is already really detailed, dynamic, and fast by default. However, if you want even more air with the TS34, hey man, knock yourself out. So one of the reasons I have discontinued the TS120 Standard Edition is that the TS34 can use both EL34 and KT88. Now at the back there's a switch to select between both tubes. Why did I not build an amp that can take more tubes than that? Like 6L6 for example. In theory it can, but I have yet to run long-term tests with those tubes, so I'll only talk about them later on my other Gallion channel, like how it works with KT66 tubes, but sometime in the future. Next, the TS34 has an advanced auto bias system. It biases the tubes with the help of a microchip. Now you press a few buttons from your remote or from the amplifier and you are done. There's no need for screwdrivers, no need for reading glasses, and a steady hand. Well, if you're an old man like me, you know what I'm talking about. And for those who are so lazy that they don't want to press a few buttons, I asked Mr. Liu why he built the TS120 and TS34 to have an auto bias system that requires me to press a button. Do you know how much energy it takes me to press those buttons? Wouldn't it be better if everything is automatic? Now, after he explained why, I was totally on board with him. See, Mr. Liu wanted the auto bias circuit outside the signal path to preserve maximum fidelity. There is no free lunch. Engineering is all about finding the best compromise. Auto bias outside the signal path is one of the reasons why the TS34 can still maintain composure at high volume with heavy bass. Now, I'm not saying amps that have full auto bias circuit are not good, because who knows, man. Other companies might have solved the problem Mr. Liu has discovered by measurements. Who knows? So next, just like the TS120, the TS34 has 3 sound profiles, giving you different sound. One is more lively than the other. Sound profile A and B will bypass tone control. To use tone control, you need to select profile T, right? T stands for tone control. Now, how tone control is implemented is very different with the TS34. The changes to the sound when using tone control are subtle. And instead of affecting the 10 kilohertz for treble, it affects the 6 kilohertz area, which I find that's where the sibilance of the human voice is. See, the changes are subtle because if you need a tone control to drastically change the sound of your amplifier, you bought the wrong amp, period. Next, the TS34 also has dual stereo subwoofer. You know, it's 2024 now. A dual subwoofer is like almost mandatory. It has HT-in, some people call it pre-in, so that it can act like a power amp. The volume just gets disabled in HT-in. Finally, it has a remote control that is so solidly built that you can use it as a self-defense weapon. Now, everyone will ask how the TS34 compares to the TS120. Now, the TS34 is more lively and brighter on the top end. The TS120 is smoother and has stronger, more authoritative bass. Well, because it has two power supplies, and the TS34 only has one. But for some people, if the room is not too big, the TS34, having about 10-15% less bass, might actually be a better solution. Mid-range on both are about the same because the TS120 SE has custom capacitors to elevate the mid-range. So let's end the video at this point. So one concern some people will have is, Thomas, man, 25 watt in Class A, 40 watt in Class AB, is that enough? The same concern people have as with my TS A20, 20 watt only, right? The TS120, 30 watt only. But think about this for a second. At every audio show, everyone guess, is that 150 watt, 200 watt, 300 watt? Because these amps are so powerful. It's a high current design. Everyone, I know these days they're used to Class D, 200 watts, 1000 watt. But don't be surprised if this TS34 will outperform your 200 watt Class D amp in terms of power, dynamics, and bass. The thing weighs bloody 65 pounds. So in short, EL34 tubes combined with rich sounding Bumblebee capacitors in a modern circuit designed by Doge will give you an amplifier that can be your endgame amplifier. Look at all the positive reviews on Gallion products, not only by YouTubers, but by actual owners. You can be sure every product by Gallion has something special because I've spent countless hours making sure it reaches my standard and also my audio buddy's standard before I bring it to market. Okay, till next time.
I never think, I never know. I'm stuck and left alone. I've been lost, I've been fine. My cause is not